I'm Flavia Belliani Zimmerman from the Australian Institute of International Affairs in Western Australia and through the Centre for Muslim States and Societies at the University of Western Australia. Today we have with us Mr. Tayyeb Shah. Mr. Shah, he is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Global Partnerships at the University of Western Australia. And today we are going to be discussing how academic power is moving east. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Shah.
Thank you, Flavia.
Mr. Shah, if you can please explain to us how growing academic leverage is being experienced across the region.
So Asia has gradually, as we know, been becoming more important on the world stage. We often talk about how economic power has moved towards the east, that countries like China and India have become more economically powerful. And indeed, in the case of China, we assume that they are now achieving a superpower status on the world stage. Now, alongside that, what we are seeing is a move towards Asia becoming more powerful in other spheres as well. It could be sports, it could be cultural, and indeed academic is also becoming more important. So it's important for us to consider that specific context alongside all the other different areas in which Asia has become more prominent on the world stage.
Mm-hmm. And in your view, in which ways, if you could give us a little bit more detail, how academic power is moving east?
Sure. So in very broad terms, what we are seeing are evidence of universities from different parts of Asia, from China, from Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, India, Japan, Taiwan, where they have gradually started to rise in the academic ranks of world universities. So you look at the rankings of universities globally, and you will spot, for example, that Singapore has two very good universities that are in the world top 100. China has the same, and so on. And what we're seeing there is a very concerted effort on the part of governments to invest in elite universities in their countries as a mark of national pride, really. They want to ensure that they have world-class institutions within their countries. How they're achieving that is through essentially a lot of financial funding for key universities. So investing in research and development, investing in very sophisticated laboratories and equipment, and most importantly, investing in academic talent. And they do that in a number of different ways. Typically, lots of students will have gone overseas and studied in the US or in the UK, Australia indeed, and many will have stayed on and become academics within institutions in those countries. And what the countries in Asia, like China, Singapore and others, have done is try to attract that talent back. So you have things like in China, you have the 1,000 Talents program. In Singapore, they will attract faculty from across the world. And what they're doing there is offering very lucrative salaries, expat packages and so on, to attract the world-leading talent to their institutions. So that combination of deep investment in research and development, very good talent, academic talent from across the globe, as well as ensuring that they have some of the world's best facilities, combines to ensure that they are now becoming more and more powerful, academically speaking. And that's shown, as I said, not just through rankings, but the fact that their R&D output, their number of patents, their research citations has increased such that it is very difficult to ignore the work that is being undertaken by institutions in this continent now.
Mm-hmm. And would you mind discussing a little bit more when you're talking about grants, and we're talking about countries such as India and China. So are those grants being raised domestically, or they also come from international partnerships?
So predominantly it is domestic, but of course there is a lot of international research collaboration. And that's because what is called the field weighting citation impact of international research is much greater typically than domestic research. And so you have lots of governments who, like for example in the UK, you have the Newton scheme, which will co-fund with India and will look at ways in which they can encourage collaboration between the two countries, academics and institutions. And that is growing. But when you look at countries like Singapore that have invested $16 billion US dollars over the last 5 years in research and development, it gives you an idea that they're focused on building their domestic capability and very much engaged in trying to attract best academics to want to collaborate. And so that's been evidenced in many metrics, and it's a pattern that's now repeating in different countries across Asia. The countries that I've mentioned are the ones that are at the forefront of this movement, but that is not to say that others are not trying to catch up. And so you will see, for example, outliers like Saudi Arabia that have invested in KAUST, which is a science and technology university that has now the world's largest endowment, even bigger than Harvard's.
Thank you so much. And if you can please explain to us, when we're thinking about the Colombo Plan and the new Colombo Plan, what is exactly the role played by student interchange in this growing academic leverage of China?
So I think it plays a very important role. It's the Australian government's initiative to encourage students from this country to go to the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific countries, and in return to also invite students here. So that type of mobility is key when you are engaging with or experiencing institutions of the kind that I described. So world-leading universities that will continue to get stronger and stronger. Engaging with students in those institutions allows you to develop networks and friendships. It allows you to really understand the cross-cultural differences and the nuances of that. And that type of international travel, as we know, improves our students as well as the students that we host here in terms of their intercultural skills and competences, and in a sense also improves their employment prospects, given that we are a much more interconnected world and we look for these types of qualities of cross-cultural understanding when you're seeking to employ people, particularly multinational companies.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And wrapping up our interview, if you could explain to us, in the light of the coronavirus crisis, how do you think the growing influence of Asia will be impacted by the crisis, and also how this is going to affect the relationship between emerging powerhouses, academic powerhouses in Asia, and their relationship with Australia?
So COVID, of course, has changed everything for everyone across the globe, and not least within universities, where we all had to rapidly move all of our teaching and learning online. Campuses were closed, students were having to study in isolation, usually within their homes, using online technologies like Zoom and Teams and Skype and so on. Academics also had to get used to it and had to record content, lectures and seminars and so on. And what's been great to see, certainly at UWA, is that we were able to do that very rapidly and very efficiently. And what has also been very positive to see is that students embrace that and have become very comfortable in learning online. Equally, when we look at how we collaborate with foreign universities, well, of course we can't send students overseas nor can we receive them here. But that did not stop collaboration. So research collaboration and mobility adapted to COVID. How did they do that? So we had a greater increase in the use of what's called virtual exchange or virtual mobility, otherwise called collaborative online international learning, where students would interact and interface with each other through, let's say, Zoom or even WhatsApp, using synchronous and asynchronous technologies to work together on a shared problem or project or assignment and develop those intercultural skills that I talked about earlier. Similarly, academics were working with colleagues, participating in webinars and online conferences and so on, and have adapted to that. So what are the implications of that once we achieve a state of affairs where, let's say, there is a vaccine and treatment for COVID? I think there'll be probably less face-to-face interactions as much as we had previously, but certainly in terms of inter-university relationships and engagement. There will always be the need for face-to-face when you develop an initial relationship. But to keep it developing and growing, I think that technology now allows us that opportunity to do that. For me, that's exciting because that means that we can now reach a broader cross-section of partner universities across the globe. You know, if I take, say, South America, we don't need to fly 30 hours to get there and then be jet-lagged and worry about how effective we can be in terms of engaging with developing relationships and partnerships. We can do that through Zoom, let's say. We just need to manage the time difference. But it's, I think what I've seen over the last few months, certainly over the last 6 to 8 weeks, has a lot of adaptation of online events, online collaboration, and online teaching and learning. And I do hope that that continues going forward because it will allow for much more richer and varied interaction. And I think it allows us to experiment much more with institutions where we might not feel comfortable traveling for health or security reasons. So I'd like to think that we, as the University of Western Australia that sits on the Indian Ocean rim, will be able to engage much more with, say, institutions in Africa, that we can allow our students to interact with one another and not have to worry about the fact that African students can't afford to come here, or our students worry, or their parents worry about health and security reasons in parts of Africa. So that, for me, creates wonderful opportunities. I'm certainly looking forward to how we can embrace that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. And for more information, please visit our website, www.internationalaffairs.org.au.